How to make a man crave you saying these words. Well, it seems to me the primary reason why most relationships fail, or end, I should say, is a distressing lack of emotional intimacy. Stoic men seek transactional relationships because they require very little emotional investment, whereas conscious, evolved, emotional men seek genuine emotional connection, which doesn't only come from touch, but comes from words. So today I'm excited to have two friends in the house, Sierra Sullivan and Ronno Smith from Eden World Community, to help encourage the man you're with to open up emotionally, to have an everlasting bond with him. So welcome, Ronno and Sierra.
Hey, Jonathan. So good to be here.
Yeah. Hello, hello.
I know, I'm excited. So, all right, let's just jump in with advice because I don't need to give you a resume. You're already pre-approved because you're friends of mine. So how do you help couples develop greater emotional intimacy?
Ooh, that's a big one. I would
Yeah.
say, for us, it's about prioritizing your relationship, which means you have space and time that you do active connecting, you do active growth together, you work on things, you share things. We have a weekly practice called Sacred Space we can get into at some point,
Okay.
during this conversation. But ultimately, it's making sure that you are just like literally, if you want to be healthy, you got to eat healthy. If you want, strong muscles, you got to go to the gym. If this relationships are not passive things. You need to be active in them. And that ultimately with that effort gives you a lot of ways to connect emotional intimacy. Would you add anything?
What I would add or underline is it's a practice, and it's something that develops over time. Like one of the reasons that I got with Sierra in the first place is because it's the first woman that I was with. Sorry, other women that I love as well. Like that I really felt emotionally safe with.
Yeah.
And even then it took me a good 5 years into our marriage to really start opening up. And so I would say it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes a woman to really hold a sacred and beautiful and consistent space and not make a man wrong for our shortcomings in the emotional realm. We're not wired the same way.
So is Sierra your lobster?
I don't know what that means, but it sounds great.
It's from a Friends episode, at least
Oh.
that's what I remember. You're my lobster, basically, maybe lobster's mate for life. I don't know the backstory to it. So, I shared earlier in this conversation, I said stoic men seek transactional relationships. And why I said that is I have an awareness that certain group of men seek a transactional relationship. It's based on entertainment of one another. It's based on physical intimacy. And it's based on practical things and doing in life. And it oftentimes doesn't have that emotional component, which I said earlier, comes through words. Most everybody knows the 5 love languages. But what I think sometimes is missing in that conversation, well, someone might show their love through actions, but I also believe expressing verbally is critically important. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I would say, especially for women, because we're such chatterboxes in the sense, like Alison Armstrong would say, like we like to give the Meadow report and we want the Meadow report back.
Yeah.
Details details really I know for me and many women, I've served women for, almost 20 years and, before Eden World and couples, we love details. We want to know what's going on. We want to have you speak and share. That makes us feel close.
And again, if there's not a safe space for us men to do that, or something we speak or share gets used against us later, then we're going to keep closing down. And a guy's road trip for 3 hours, when we come back and say, oh, what happened on the trip? Well, we caught up. Well, what'd you say? Well, like, how are you doing? That's about all we said. We didn't speak the entire road trip. And so it's a very different experience, not always, but like, it depends on the guys, but sometimes, you're just quiet.
A guy's road trip, if they're married, they're going to talk about golf most likely. And if they're single, they're talking about, because they're probably going to Vegas for that road trip, they're talking about all the action that they're going to get while they're there. So
you're not wrong.
Well, I'm just speculating here based on past experience from a far galaxy away that I lived in. So, you talked about sacred space, and you talked about, Ronno, about a woman creating that sacred space. And really, I suspect it's both creating that container of feeling safe, which includes sharing something and then eventually not using it against you. But how does that look? How does one create that kind of container? And given that most of my audience is women, how would they even introduce that to a man?
That's
Great
a good question. Do you have something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
unless
go
you
ahead.
do.
No, go ahead.
So it comes back to, well, sacred space can be used for two different purposes. And oftentimes the beginning of it is for the way to get it sort of introduced is when you're having a conflict. And I'll share why, and then we'll talk about the other reason, which is a maintenance.
And real quickly, just to differentiate, there's creating just a sacred space in general for communication. And then there's an actual practice that we have called sacred space, which is this process that you go through. So just FYI.
Yes, thank you. It is a specific tool and technique. So oftentimes we'll have arguments that somebody either wants to finish right away and somebody can't because their nervous system is overloaded, or things are too heated, or for whatever reason, you're not going to be able to clear up what is going on when you're in a argument or heightened state. And so we like to say that's a great time to literally say, I'd like to invoke sacred space, which then means that you will pause the conversation for a later time when you can both regroup, regulate your nervous system, come back and be available for a wholehearted, connected, safe and sacred conversation to really look at what is causing that issue. And so that men usually find that very refreshing because it helps to stop the, for lack of a better word, intensity, insanity in in a moment. Like, can we just talk about this later? It gives men literally an opportunity. Yes, we can talk about this later.
Okay.
You must talk about it later when that card is played. If you don't, then you are breaking the cardinal rule. But a lot of men appreciate that. So that gives sort of an opening for the use of this tool because it gives a place to have. But then when you come into sacred space, that's where the emotional, verbal connection needs to happen. That's where you're going to dig into what's really going on. How did you feel? How did I feel? What did I think? Where was the miss? What was going on for me? So on and so forth. So that's a good sort of way to start with that practice. But really having a regular weekly sacred space connection practice, it would keep those fights from happening, because it's like, think of it as like, you're doing your laundry every week, right? You need to move the crap along that's not good. You need to clean out the things that need to be cleaned out. You need to fold and reset things.
Take out the trash.
Yeah, take out the trash. The same thing goes with relationship, and having a practice where you intentionally have the same time gives you that opportunity. And then you can't help but bring emotional closeness when you have that dedicated time.
It's interesting. Men oftentimes get a bad rap that we're, I said earlier, stoic and that sort of thing, or less emotional. But I do have a dear friend of mine, and she entered into a relationship with a man who had a contentious relationship before her. And so in this new relationship, he said, look, I want to establish a weekly check-in.
Yep.
And I think he wanted to do this because he was afraid in the past that he did things wrong. So he wanted to check in to see how the relationship, the state of the union of the relationship once again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it actually built a stronger connection with one another. Before I ask you my next question, I want to share with you two something that just occurred to me when you were talking about sacred space. When my boys were like 7 and 10, I started something called Sacred Circle. And I would basically go like this: Sacred Circle is on, and you could say whatever you want in the circle. So now, mind you, this was a 7 and 10 years old. And they go, Dad, we can say what we ever want. And go, yeah, you can say whatever you want. Immediately became fuckity, fuckity, fuck, 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 fuckity, fuckity, fuck, fuck, fuck. I mean, and then I'd say Sacred Circle off and they'd stop. And then I'd say it on. And then this went on for 5 years, like that kind of rhetoric.
Yeah.
And then one day when my oldest was 14, he comes to me and he says, Dad, can you put on Sacred Circle? Because he wanted to share something with me. And I didn't realize this practice can be used, for parents with their children. This sacred space practice can be used in so many different ways. And it's that safe space, because it took 5 years for him to get safe. Because
right.
It was the one time he was allowed to curse.
Right.
So I love this. So what other, like, let's just say you begin dating someone. Is this something you would introduce to, like, would you even recommend this for people dating early on? Like what I shared earlier?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think I mean, early on, maybe not during the first couple dates or things like that, but as soon as
Sure.
you establish, hey, we're going steady, like we're gonna go steady, or if that's even used anymore. We're like, hey, we're kind of into this. Let's see where this goes. Let's take this out for a spin and really give it a good try, because it works with committed relationships. We're really in the business of relationships. All sorts of relationships. Like you said, this can be used anywhere, your office, anywhere. Creating a safe space for people to share and express themselves without fault is helpful. It helps people.
It's needed everywhere.
Yeah.
So the main reason why I would say it's super important for new relationships to do this and get started is because it interrupts the patterns that override and grow us apart from one another.
Okay.
And Tony Robbins and many others, but really brought neuro-linguistic programming to the forefront of our world. And a big part of NLP is stopping patterns in their tracks and learning how to feed the patterns that you want to prevail and not feed the patterns that you don't want. And because all of us bring our old baggage, even us, we've known each other for 45 years and we were friends our whole lives. The moment it turned romantic, all of a sudden we started pointing fingers at each other. And everything was fine the week before, but the next week it was like, and so
baggage showed up.
All of our old patterns from all of our past relationships were there just instantly.
It was wild.
It was totally wild. And that
By
gives
the way,
us insight. Yeah.
We had someone just post a comment. By the way, we'll take questions in about 15 minutes. But I thought this was an interesting comment, Sierra and Rano. It says, and I don't think this was directed to you, but Gigi says, help me understand, why does a couple who live together have to dedicate time to check in with each other? I've never understood when a colleague would say, I haven't talked with my husband about it. Like
there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah,
I know there. Yeah. But let's go with the first part. Help me understand why a couple who lives together need to dedicate time to check in. Like, to me, I see that as an imperative to a healthy, happy relationship, but this person doesn't understand it. So let's help her out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So first and foremost, like, you don't have a family dynamic where you don't have family rules or connection time or even dinner time for families. Like, there's never living with anyone that there's not a time where you need to connect. And that is everything from logistics to just, how's this working out? Right.
Who's taking out the trash?
Who's exactly right. So not checking in is really important no matter what relationship, and especially in a marriage or a committed partnership, because otherwise there's so many things that go unsaid. There's so much life that happens in between the times that Ronald and I work together, live together. We're always together. And there's still times where we're just
for over 15 years.
Yeah. And there's so much life between even the hours of noon and 2 o'clock that can happen. And we'll go have lunch at 2 o'clock together. I'm like, okay, what happened? And he'll have all this stuff to download. So if we don't have that, and maybe you don't want that, maybe that's not, you're not into that, but for us, and I think any healthy relationship, staying connected, staying understanding and interested in each other's lives, what happens, maybe what you share could be varied. We share everything because that's just our version of relationship and our dynamic. But if you don't check in, eventually someone's going to check out.
Yes. And given I started this conversation, given how many relationships fail or end, I'm encouraging everyone. By the way, everyone, really quickly, I'm going to post a link to Rano and Sierra's group called the Eden World Community. So you can check it out. Rano and Sierra have been married for quite some time. They have a great organization helping couples develop deeper intimacy. And as I said earlier, we oftentimes think of the word intimacy from a physical perspective. I see intimacy truly from that emotionally connected place. I don't know who coined it, into me see. I can't remember if it was Esther Perel or someone else, but I just love that when you can truly see into a partner's heart. And that's what you go. So let me ask you, what kind of problems do you see in your community? Because you have couples that have been together for maybe 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Like is there any kind of standard problem that stands out?
Lack of intimacy.
Well, we talking, okay.
Number one.
But they're already part of your group, so.
Yeah, we say that we're joking about, maybe we'll write a book on this, because so many of the couples have the same patterns, which become problems. Patterns become problems. Problems are the pattern. And so we see repeating patterns through everything. Like there's the pattern of, you don't listen to me, right? Somebody's not hearing somebody's talking over somebody doesn't feel like they've been heard, or they didn't say it. So that's a communication problem pattern. There's usually a mismatched libido, or inability to speak desires, or have safety in order to speak desires, or even explore desires. That's a common challenge all the time. What are a few would you would say?
Oh my goodness.
So many.
Well, I mean, there's lack of intimacy is a big one, and it's the emotional intimacy, it's the physical intimacy, it's mismatched libidos, as you said. And like, those are a lot of the common ones. And every single one of them starts from not having regular check-ins, not having regular times reconnecting with one another, and making up stories. And then those stories grow. Like us too. Unfortunately, we're not immune to it. Like, even though we have all these great tools and practices, there's still things that I'm like, well, blah, blah, blah. She's like, I said that 10 years ago. And I was like, yeah, but you really meant it. And she's like, yeah, but I meant it like this. And I was like, oh, so we're making machines. We will always make up stories. And that's what causes problems.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sierra.
Well, I was gonna say, I also see a lot of finger pointing and blame, right? Like thinking and a lot, and
not taking personal
responsibility for how you've contributed to the situation. And then I also see around that, a lot of times partners think that they're the one doing all the evolution or the growth, and they,
especially the ladies.
Yeah. Whoa. I want to piggyback on that, but finish your thoughts, Sierra.
Yeah, like we think, oh, I'm doing all this growth, I'm the one. Everybody has this sort of self-centered view of their experience, and we don't always notice or understand the amount of evolution and personal growth that our partners are doing, because it often looks very different.
I grow very differently than her.
Yeah.
So I continually say on my channel or on my videos that women oftentimes, and I use an illustration, have duct tape over their mouth, meaning they're often silent to their emotions or feelings, or they oftentimes vomit their emotions and feelings in a way that isn't seen, heard, and understood. Yeah. And because they're silent to their emotions or feelings, or they vomit their emotional feelings, they feel like, and again, this is a perception I've witnessed, that they are more, invested in the relationship from an emotional perspective compared to the man. And I'm here to say men can articulate their feelings if they know how to tap into it. But if you're silent, that doesn't help the relationship. And if you're incoherent, that doesn't help the relationship.
Absolutely.
So, and I suspect that within Eden World, you have certain tools, certain languaging to help couples connect when they're stuck. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We even have 12 principles that are relational principles that we practice as a community, which is kind of a set of values of how we want to show up and be in the relationship. And then, yeah, I feel you, girl. Totally. Whoever said that. Yeah. And then we have 4 pillars, which we run everything through, which is sovereignty, relationship with self, unity, relationship with another human, community, which is your family, your work, your environment, and then humanity. And so we have that framework that we run. And
personal responsibility is one of those principles. And how can you take personal responsibility? How can we take personal responsibility for our relationship, our community, and humanity? So it's constantly looking at how we interact with those around us, from our self and then to others. And so all the principles are great. You can get those at edenworld.org/principles, and you can get all of them yourself.
Below.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So I suspect you use a lot of nonviolent communication techniques coming from the I statement. It was interesting before I ever did this work. Most everybody says relationships is all about communication. But it's also learning how to communicate, as I said earlier, in a way. And oftentimes we do it in this violent, the book should have been titled Compassionate Communication instead of Nonviolent. But the violence in that it's combative, it's accusatory towards another person. You did this, instead of I felt this way when this happened. So what kind of things does Eden World do? Like, do you have regular, like, I know you do group things with other couples, right?
Yep.
What's the benefit of doing that within groups? What's the benefit to each individual?
Mm-hmm.
So what we found, as we mentioned, we've known each other our whole lives. And when we went romantic, we found that we didn't necessarily need a coach. We didn't necessarily need therapy. We just needed other healthy couples around us.
We needed perspective
to get different perspective and
Yeah.
somebody to just be like, hey man, you're being a little bit harsh right now. But I didn't need to sit down and be like, the reason you're so harsh is because your dad loved, like, that's fine. And it's great. And it's got its place and it's amazing. But what we found is that when you're surrounded by other couples that are committed to being the best at loving one another, and that you can literally just learn by osmosis, and just by being around other couples, you immediately learn, is that what I sound like when I do that? Oh, I don't want to be that way anymore.
You can see your patterns much more clearly. Your eyes get open to the things that you do, and you feel less alone because you see other couples dealing with very similar, if not exactly the same challenges.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a community in general, but especially, we're told in society, don't air your dirty laundry about your relationship. And so a lot of people keep everything very protective and safe and everything because they don't, but in Eden, we're all about, no, let's normalize the dirty laundry. We are all having these same problems. See, look, just in this circle of 6 couples, 4 of you have just been through that same exact thing. It's not that big of a deal. And yes, it hurts. And yes, there's some things to do and some tools and some ways to repair and whatnot. But honestly, it's kind of human, and it takes it away from the, in your like, we're just awful and you're awful. And it's like shortcuts.
It's interesting. You both know I belong to a community called the G&G group. And it's both men and women. And there's times where we get together. I call it where group therapy meets pajama party meets cocktail party kind of thing.
Nice.
Sounds awesome.
That's
awesome.
No, it's fun. And what's interesting is when I first joined, I was rather nervous, and so and oftentimes we'd work on a process. It might be a mirror process where we looked at ourselves in the mirror and said things like I loved you or something like that, or there'd be a gratitude process where everybody got together and expressed gratitude for one another. But as we got into the deeper nooks and crannies, when I heard others share their experience, it helped teach me how to communicate, not mimic per se, but listening to how others communicated to one another. First off, it was a sacred space, so it felt safe. But more importantly, it helped develop the muscle for me to be vulnerable, to be in that space, because being vulnerable isn't something we should fear. It's probably, in many people's cases, probably their number one fear, even more so than snakes or public speaking, is to be vulnerable to people that they know and love. So I love that you do this in that kind of space. And someone even wrote the comment, I suspect that the other couples can see the blind spots.
Absolutely.
Of course, you too, because this is what you do, but it's that space of being able to see, I don't see this. Even though it's right in front of me, I still don't see it. It's a blind spot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well said. Mm-hmm.
So what else? We talked about the 4. What were the 12 principles? If you could share that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All of them?
Well, we may have to get our cheat.
Only because now I'm curious. So
Well, our number one principle is relationship is our North Star, meaning that we see relationship as a path to evolution as humans, and that we use each other as sacred mirrors, or not use each other, but see each other as sacred mirrors. We're willing to learn about ourselves through the reflection and the work of a partnership.
And we often say that 1 and 1 isn't 2, 1 and 1 is 11 with relationship. And that's kind of what North Star means, that we can go further together. We can heal faster. We can love each other more. We can move through things and just become better human beings through the crucible of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to, no, go ahead. You asked the question.
No, you know what? I love this relationship as North Star. And I say this because I witness so many people that enter into a relationship without a game plan.
Yes.
And I say this in the sense that, you know, not that you need a written script per se, but it's so much easier when you have a kind of a game plan, first knowing what's the purpose of this relationship. Like, what are we really doing this for? And because I'm a dating and relationship coach, I witness so many people haphazardly enter into a relationship. It's like they're walking in a room that's dark and they're expecting it to just snap their fingers. There's going to be light, and that's not how it works.
Yeah, and they expect it to just be everything that they want, and that person to understand, and they won't even have to ask for it, and it'll just happen. All those things. Yeah.
Okay, I just had someone ask, so how to make a man crave you by saying these words. So let's get into that. What? And by the way, whether you're a man or woman, it doesn't really matter, even though my audience is women. What can a person do that's entering into a relationship to create a greater connection? Like, what are some simple things that can be said to create that, you know, deeper connection to help build that relationship into something more substantial?
All right. This might be a little controversial for people that are commitment phobic, but
okay.
This is something that you could try on in small packages or a wider timeline. But we like to say that to have any relationship be successful, whether you're just starting out or you're even been committed for years, is to make sure that you take the relationship off the chopping block, meaning you don't threaten the relationship. So if you're in even a new relationship, but you know that this is somebody that you want to give it a go with, and you both are in agreement, you have to both be in agreement that you're going for it. You're putting a relationship container on this. You're like, all right, we're gonna whatever. We're take it out for a spin. Exactly. Yeah. We would set a period of time. So say like, okay, for the next month to give it a proper spin. Okay. Let's be all in. All in on this relationship, right? That means we're not thinking, oh, toe out the door. If something gets hairy, we're not thinking, is this the one for me? You're gonna act as if this is the one. You're going to go all in. You're going to set that agreement. And then in that time frame, even if it's 2 weeks, 3 months, you know, whatever it is, you can then renegotiate that. But it gives all of you a chance to let your nervous systems rest, because a lot of times we hold back because we're trying to impress, we're trying to please, we're trying to make a good impression, and then we're actually not being ourselves. And
then it takes several years for you to actually be yourself. And at that point, in that 2 to 3 year mark, where a lot of relationships end, that 3 year mark, and there's a bunch in before that, but 3 years in, that's a big darn commitment of your time and energy. You do that 5, 6, 7 times, and you want children. Now you're starting to get a little too old to have children. And so it really does help to put a container on your relationship. And again, I wouldn't do this a month in, week in. Like it's when you're like, when you're like, taking this to serious.
Yeah. When you're like, we want to really know.
What's interesting, because I have a tiny, first off, I agree 1,000%, but recently I have an interesting take. I want your perspective on this. So I'm in love with this show called Love is Blind. Because it fits in the narrative of what I do for a living. And if you know the story where two people are connected, they can't see each other, they have to, you know, get to know each other. Eventually the guy usually proposes to the woman, they physically see each other, and then they go on a brief honeymoon together, and then they live together. And I actually almost like this idea, and let me explain why. So within 8 weeks, you're like, look, you're all in for this 8-week period. You're all in. I'm going to see how you live. I'm going to see how you operate, how you treat people. I'm going to see how you operate to really make a decision. Does it even make sense to go? Now, in this case, they're supposed to get married, which I'm not in agreement with.
Right.
But the idea is, I love the idea of actually committing all in. And it doesn't have to be financial resources. It could be simply that agreement that we're really going to take this seriously. We're going to go all in. I think if couples did this more frequently, we'd either see a lot of people end things much sooner than 3 years, as Rana was sharing, or it could help build on the relationship because you already find that you have so much in common because you actually, I feel like dating today is a long drawn out version of friends with benefits.
Totally. I can see
Yeah, I
that.
mean, in other words, because you're not spending, like sometimes you only see each other once a week, that sort of thing. It's really just an extended version of friends with benefits because they're not building roots together. And I love that you talk about going all in is sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and one thing I would add to, Jonathan, that I think is helpful in the first stages of your relationship.
Yeah.
A lot of women, when I used to support women in similar work that you do, a lot of women are afraid to say what they want or put that out there. And it doesn't have to be like, I want to have children. And if you don't want to have, like, that's a deal breaker.
Most of my audience is over 40. So that's usually not the case with my audience.
Well, then good. Then keep doing what you're doing, and just be sure to be yourself and be clear with what you want. And the guy that wants that will find you. But if you're sort of not doing it, then you're sort of not going to get the guy. But if you're like, this is what I want, this is what I'm clear for, be open to it. Don't be so stuck with how it has to look, but be clear with what you want and put it forward, in a loving, kind way.
I am in full agreement. I jokingly have the duct tape because I think many women in particular fear establishing their standard. Like that's the way I view that, Rano, is that's the standard that I seek in this container. And they're afraid because they might scare a person off. And I'm here to say, you scare the wrong person off. That's a good thing. But the right person will go, oh, I'm kind of curious about that. Let's get, I'm curious about that. I want to investigate a little bit more. You only scare the wrong people by speaking your truth.
Absolutely.
Now, I always say, if it's sincere and from the heart, if you're coming from ego, if you're coming from fear, if you're coming from pain, you might scare someone off, but when you come from the heart, you can't scare someone off. Really quickly, I want to open it up, everyone. If you have a question for Rano or Sierra, please write the word question in the chat box and then post the question there after, or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Asley. That's a picture of him right there with his brother. It's my son who passed away over 6 years ago. In his honor, we donate to causes like the Hoffman Process and Insight Institute, just to name a few. And our goal tonight is $50. So we'd appreciate that love. Hit that little $ for some donations. And then you can post a question as well. So as we wait for questions, what's the worst kind of situation you've seen with couples? I'm curious.
I think we're sworn to secrecy, but we'll see what we can do.
I don't want to divulge any,
No, I mean, it's just, it's when you've gone so far and made up so many stories about each other that you can't even actually see the person for who they really are. And the walls have grown up so big and are so vined over that you're just yelling at each other from over here and considering divorce. And there's not even an opportunity to find love again. Every single person that's in a relationship did it because they loved the person. They wanted to be with them. And then something happened where they grew apart because of those pesky patterns. And now so I think that's the biggest ones.
By the way, if you notice the question that came in, we just started with the 12 and then I interrupted you as I typically do. Sierra, do you mind sharing the 12 with everyone?
Yeah, and I'll put it in the chat too.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. So we have relationship is our North Star. Oh, do they want the link or they want to hear the principle? They want to hear the principles.
Oh, the principles. Here are the principles.
Yeah. So number one principle is relationship is our North Star. We are each other's beloved is number 2, meaning we treat our community and our, the other couples and life and everybody as wonderful as we do our partners. Okay. And sometimes they'll trigger you just like your partner does. All the way through is number 3, which means we don't leave things unaddressed. Okay. If something's bothering us, we do everything we can to get it to the other side so that we can feel clean and clear and supportive. That's kind of weird the way that it is.
I know. It didn't
Just go back to my link here.
Got it.
And then we have this is a crowd pleaser. What's in the way is the way. That one's everyone's like, ooh, right? Because whatever you think is the problem is the solution, is the path to the solution, to a higher perspective. So
Okay.
Yep.
that one's a really good one. We have honor and integrity, making sure you know what you do, what you say what you mean what you say, do what you say.
Yeah. Personal responsibility, which is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Full sovereign expression, which is sometimes very hard to do in relationship. Like, how can you stay fully expressed as yourself, but still honor and love this other person and not, you know, put too much on them?
Yeah,
Sure.
that one's and allowing each other to have full sovereign. Yeah,
expression.
exactly.
Yeah.
Number 8 is present awareness, right? Be
Okay.
here now. A lot
Yes.
of these are self-explanatory, right? 9, assume the best. Everybody's coming from good intentions, even though good intentions, you know, sometimes pave the way to hell, but everybody's got good intentions. Really, they do.
Especially if you're in a committed relationship.
And just they have different things that are up, or reasons or things. So assuming the best
is also like same team would be another way of saying that.
Yeah, same team.
Yeah.
10 is giving frequency. So give from your overflow, give from your generosity, give to yourself, be forgiving. 11 is all needs met. This is really a lot in the context of Eden World, but the whole thing is like,
Community.
yeah, but Rana would have a need and I would have a need. A lot of times we think, oh, compromise, but what if there's a higher need that meets both of our needs better than what we consider? Just trying to have my need met or his need met.
Yeah.
So there's usually a bigger thing that could be met. And then
the last one, number 12, is we hold it together.
Together. We hold it together. We're not here to hold it on our own. We're here to, we're all in this.
We're holding our relationship together.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're in a relationship. The three of us, we're on holding this container of your show, and we're holding it together. We're creating something together. So,
well, I love your 12 principles. This is excellent. And I would encourage everyone to go to their website. I'm sure there's a way to download and all that good stuff. Why this is so important is, I believe, with couples that actually begin a relationship from a place of consciousness. In other words, an awareness that, you know, not to blindly go through a relationship, but actually have a blueprint of how to create greater connection with one another. So I really appreciate that. By the way, we have a few questions that have come in. So Annika wrote, how do I introduce sacred space to a new person I'm dating? What words to use? We kind of talked about this before, but let's do it again. How would you introduce that to someone you're just dating?
Go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, go.
How I would want to hear it from a woman that I was dating. Okay. I would want to hear something like, I'm really enjoying growing with you and learning more about you and getting our relationship really good. And I heard about this cool practice that successful couples do to make sure that they always have everything that they need in their relationship. I'm wondering if that's something that you would do with me and that we could try together so that we could create like even more flow in our awesome relationship. I'd be like, hell yeah, baby. What do you like? Let's do it.
Well, you say hell yeah because you're a more conscious, evolved, you know, emotionally intelligent man.
Well, I also did it like a sales presentation using
no, I get that. I get
things to get it into those guys.
Yeah. No, and recognize that, you know, many men are closed off. There's no doubt about it. There's avoidant love attachment style that's kind of popular in the vernacular today, which I just believe is either emotionally closed off, emotionally constipated, or my phrase is emotionally constipated instead of emotionally available. Because I do believe, as you said earlier in your 12 principles, most everybody, I believe, comes with good intentions. And I think sometimes when we don't know ourselves, coming back to that sovereignty piece, we oftentimes unintentionally hurt other people in relationship because we don't truly know ourselves, which is one of the fundamental principles of what you talk about. But when you truly get to know yourself, you're probably more open to this kind of conversation, because I think at the end of the day, you know, George Clooney said it best in Up in the Air. He said, life is better with company. You know, you two are your lobsters to one another. You guys look adorable. And I've known you both for a very long time. And I've been able to witness your relationship. And you're one of those couples that, you know, you live by what you share. So I really appreciate that. Really quickly, there's more. We've got a $1.99 super sticker from Roller Girl and a $10 super sticker from Julianne. So thank you so much. We also have Sophia who says, how soon into a new relationship should one go all in? What are the indicators of relationships should we seek to make such a decision?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. Well, obviously both parties.
I have my thoughts.
Yeah,
I bet you we all
I'm
are,
sure, right? That's like $1 million question in your world. You know, it takes two. You got to feel like you're both ready for the conversation. And what does all in mean to you? Like, that's a really good question to get clear on. And at the end of the day, what we say is that if you genuinely like this person, you have a good time with this person. It's not all about the chemistry. You're not blinded by the chemistry. You feel there's a certain way you feel with this person, and no matter what, if the honeymoon phase wears off, if the sex dies out, that you're still going to enjoy this person's company. That's a good indicator that it's worth having that conversation. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, I see all in stages kind of thing, you know, to some degree. I mean, you know, it's funny. Usually the last stage of all in is where there's a commingling of money. That tends to be like the last stage.
That's a good last stage. Like down the way.
Yeah, because we've seen it many times. The couples mingle.
You know, on some level, but the sad part is that almost says we covet money more than, you know, physical intimacy. It seems to me physical intimacy for many people is like the first stage of going all in, if you will.
Right.
And they haven't even built the other stages. But to me, I look at it, at least in the early stage of all in, is saying, look, I like you, you like me. I want to give this the test drive, as you said, not from a shoe shopping perspective. Like I'm really want to see if we should buy this car together kind of thing. And at least whatever effort you make in the beginning, you're committed to making that effort. That's what all in is. I'm committed to this stage of the effort. And as we grow, I'm going to continually be more committed as we develop a closer connection with one another. That's the way I view all in.
Absolutely. And what I love about what you shared is, I'm assuming like most people here are, if you're women, I'm assuming that many of them are dating men, and men love to have clear, clean, straightforward things given to them. Like information. They just want to hear it straight up. And so the way you just said it, Jonathan, it's good.
Well, I also know that women have a propensity to say in 10,000 words what we can only hear in 10 words. So, and that's a tongue-in-cheek joke.
That's great.
But, well, I always think, you know, it's funny when I do hot seat, I go, look, ask me the question first, then give me the backstory.
Yes.
Because then I can track it. Yeah. Because if I'm trying to find the pony in the poop. I can't figure it out. But if you start with what you're going, then the whole other meandering can go all over the place, but I can keep track of it all.
I forget who said it, but somebody said, give the reason why news works so well is because they're like, boy found dead. Oh, okay, great. So I'm looking for a boy found dead. Great. Now I can go through the whole thing. But if you're just like, oh, there was this thing, and then over there, and then they went to the house, and they went down the river, and then it was down the street, and then the neighbor called, like, what are we even talking about here? Oh, right.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because there are times where the news would be, we'll say boy found dead, but you have to wait 30 minutes to actually get to that report.
Right. It's a hook.
But you got hooked. So
yes, I got hooked. So that's the same thing in communication. I want to give Annika some props for the $5 super sticker. Thank you so much. Annika also just came in with a question. What is the higher need that you mentioned that is good for both partners opposed to honoring each other's need?
Well, it's not either or, because sometimes if he has a need and I'm happy to honor, and it's usually the all needs met is when our needs feel like they're in conflict, like somebody has to acquiesce to the other person, or somebody's going to have, right. That's when the all needs met principle comes into play.
We can give you an example. Like one of our friends, and also a relationship expert, she is an extreme extrovert and he is an extreme introvert. And it's like oil and water. How could that possibly work in their relationship? Yeah. But she teaches something called a bib toe, which is both is better than one, which is very similar to our all needs met principle. And for them, she's like, I want to go out and party all night. And he's like, how about we just stay in, watch a movie, and go to bed?
Yeah.
And so how do we compromise? So what they'll do, or how do they meet all needs? So her need is to have some connection with other people. His need is to stay in. So what they've done as an example is they'll like, we'll go to the party till whenever you want to leave, you just give me a 15-minute warning and then I will leave. And so he has he's like, okay, I'll go. But then he knows that he can exit whenever he wants to go. She has 15 minutes and then she'll go. So she still gets to have her party and get out and see people. And he gets to go home when he wants to.
And he gets to be there with her.
Yep. And they get to be together. So there's many ways.
Actually,
that's a quick example.
This reminds me of a story. Speaking of relationship coach, who's a friend of mine. She's also an astrologer. Almost the exact same scenario. She's the extreme extrovert and he is an absolute introvert. And for years they had this problem because they'd want to go to a party, or she wanted to go to a party with all of the relationship coaches and all the other groups of people. And he's like, I don't want to go. And they fought for years. And then he came up with a solution that I think you might find interesting to piggyback on the people you were just sharing. He goes, you know what? We own 2 cars. Why don't we both go to the party together? I walk in with you. I stay 1 hour so you feel like your husband, and they're married, by the way, is with you. And then I can come home and you can come home at 2 a.m. And
exactly.
But that's an example of going to that next level. It's not about making either person wrong. It's about finding a higher solution. Coming back to Annika's question, how can we find a higher solution for the both of us that doesn't feel like a tremendous compromise where you feel like you're sacrificing, so to speak?
And if they were fighting for 5, 10, 15 years of their relationship, think about how many times and how many things that we fight over that we could, if we just take a moment and like, well, what's my real need? It's usually you have to find the need under the need, under the need.
Not the wants, not the desires, but the need. And then you can play with wants and desires.
So, well, let's talk about that. We have a question, but I want to talk about that for a second. You know, sometimes it's difficult to know what your need is. Like it's all up here. It's nebulous. It's kind of floating, you know, to really get granular. I suspect one of the primary needs is connection and the other is safety, or at least, you know, feeling safe. Am I accurate in saying those are 2 of probably the primary needs?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you know, to feel connected with a person, I think so many human beings, we just weren't taught this shit. Like we didn't get to observe it growing up, you know. We didn't do a great job, even though we think we do, with our friends. And then eventually you end up in a relationship and we just expect, just because we're 30, 40, 50, or 60 years old, like we should be good at this stuff.
Right.
Like there, it almost is, you know, there's almost this naivety. We should just be good at relationships. And it's the one thing that's not taught to us. You know, we're taught how to brush our teeth. We're taught how to put on a shoe. We're even taught how to tie shoelaces. Okay. But we're not taught how to communicate. You know, we learn oftentimes through bad role models in many cases. What inspired you guys to do Eden World?
For literally what you just said, that we witnessed and continue to witness so much unconscious behavior on this planet with people. And we see so many beautiful relationships just fall apart. And we see so many hurt children walking around with so much pain and suffering because their parents can't get along. And even if they grew up in a good household, like they're still like, what the hell, mom and dad? Or, you know, even if they're together, like my parents are still together. They're amazing. They love each other, and they're incredibly dysfunctional too, because they can, my dad's that stoic guy and he's loving and kind and sweet, but you want to talk about emotions and they'll just walk out of the room. Like it's just not part of the culture. And because of that, we've found that that's our way of giving back to the love that we have and the connection that we have. And if we can just help ease some of the suffering of people, because it's just about just trying a little bit to be a little bit more vulnerable and just open up our hearts a little bit more so that there's less Grinches and more big open hearts. That's a big one.
And a safe place to do it. Eden World provides couples a greater container. We call it the coupledom. And it gives us a chance to rest our relationship in the arms of the greater relationship of all of us figuring it out together. None of it, that's where the we hold it together comes from, because none of us really know, because like you said, we've never really been taught fully, and we all come from different backgrounds and different ideas, and then the attachment wounds and the this and the that. And so if we have a place of practice and a container that holds all of us to get messy, to be, heard and learned and intentional and unintentional, and to see ourselves through others, we were hungry for a place like that. We found a lot of entrepreneurial clubs or masterminds or things like that, but we didn't really see a community that was dedicated to couples sharing their wisdom with each other. Yes, still learning and growing and hearing from experts and whatnot, and having coaching if you need it, but a place where really it's like on the court, doing relationship together, figuring it out, and winning the game of relationship as a whole collective.
Yeah. I love this because I think Rano said earlier, we talked about therapy, and certainly I have a great deal of respect for therapy. I like this because you're not just alone in doing this. You're doing it with a group of people. And I would encourage anyone who's watching this, again, I'll post the links below so you can check out Eden World Community to see if it makes sense if you're in a relationship, or just if you want to start preparing for one. I think couples have to be together for a year before they can join the group. Is that right? Or
yes, and
6 months, or
if you recommend them, then we might make an exception. But
okay.
yeah,
you have to be committed to doing the work with this person, because we have found that if you come into the Eden ecosystem and you're not sure if this is your person, you may be unsure of your future. But if you're like, nope, I found them and we're going to do this work. If not, it'll spit you out, like just the amount of the energetic and the consciousness of what we're up to. So that's why we want to say at least give it 4 seasons. And so, because we're going to take you places sometimes that are uncomfortable, and you're going to want to be able to feel like this is the relationship to do this kind of work with.
Okay, I'm going to get, first off, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. So we're going to be wrapping up in a moment, but I have a question for the two of you. You shared earlier, you grew up in the same town, you knew each other. I want to tell everyone, how did you two hook up? Where did it go? How did it go from friendship to coupledom?
Well, we joke and say magic hands, but
short story.
We'll give you a little bit more.
So he was like a brother to me.
Okay.
And I didn't hang out with him in high school. We even went to the same college, didn't really hang out with him, but we knew each other, and he was around.
She has two. We're both from 4 siblings, and our oldest sisters are the same age, and then it kind of spatters down within a 7-year period, but we all grew up together.
So was he in the friend? Was Rano in the friend zone at that point?
He was more, like walled in concrete friend zone. Because when we got reconnected later on in life and became friends, we actually ended up becoming colleagues and business partners. So we went from friends to business partners, and so and he dated my sister in high school, and I dated his cousin in high school. So he was like this weird.
And where did you meet me?
Hi, where did I meet you? Oh, yeah. Want me to say where I met you?
Sure.
Yeah, I was single and on plenty of fish, and we were chatting.
By the way, so confession, everyone, Sierra and I met through a dating app. Actually, we didn't meet physically until the two of you were together. We were at a party, but we talked for years as friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to, so you guys grew up together, you had siblings together, but you became business partners together.
So in that company,
what's that?
What shifted for us is because we were working together so much. We had a magazine at the time, and it required a lot. I was her creative director, and we were spending a lot of time working together. And slowly over time, we started noticing that we missed each other when we weren't around each other. And she would be out on a date and we would be each other's plan B for years. Like she'd have concert tickets and her guy couldn't go. She's like, hey, I got these tickets. You want to go? We'd go. We even held hands. It was even like
we were like the most platonic love story ever for the longest time.
And then the last girl that I dated before Sierra, maybe it's questionable that time of my life, but she said, are you and Sierra, is there something going on with you guys? I was like, her? No. But even our partners could see that we were connecting on just a deep, emotional, beautiful way.
And we had history. So as he got more involved in my business, we started business together. Then he got involved in the magazine at the time. And he would come over and spend a couple nights in Hollywood. This is when we lived in LA, and he was living in Venice. So he would spend the night, and then eventually, like, we'd be hanging out more. And then one night, a couple nights, he'd end up in my bed, but platonically, totally platonic, except one night we reconnected. He had happened to be in Hollywood like the night before for a friend's gig at a Viper Room or something. He was like, oh, I'll come by your house. I came home late. I was out on a date. I was actually out on a date, and he called. He was like, hey, I'm here. I'm like, oh, I forgot. Oh, I'll be home in a little bit.
So she went back to making out with this guy.
I was making out with this guy. Literally, this guy was rubbing me the wrong way. You ever have like literally physically, like he was rubbing me the wrong way. I was like, and after I hung up with Rano, I was like, all I could think about was getting home, ditching this guy and getting home to Rano. And that was the first time I'd actually been like, I had never thought of it like that before. So I'm like, all right, I got to go. I went home. He had left these beautiful notes for me as I like drove in. There was like a note on the gate, and then a note on the door, and then a note in the kitchen. Like just being who he was,
just being a bud.
But it was so sweet, like welcome home, Queen Sierra, and like all these little sweet notes. And then I walk in, and he's passed out. He's passed out on the couch,
drooling and snoring. Probably a real picture of beauty.
I'm like, oh, so I go to get ready, and then I'm like, I should at least wake him up, give him a blanket, tell him I'm home. He left these beautiful notes. I'm like, hey, you can sleep on the couch, or you can get in the bed. It's fine. I'm going to bed. Either way. He's like, well, I'll get in the bed. I was like, okay. So we go to bed platonically, but he was getting his hands got a little wandery that night.
Oh.
And I was like, no.
But the whole time she said she felt all this electricity.
I could feel all this electricity. I'm like, okay, I can keep holding this at bay and have him all boxed in and all these things, like he's untouchable. There's all these things that could go bad if this didn't work out. And I just thought, what if for one night I just let all that go and just see what happens? And then I let it go.
I remember her just like reaching around, grabbing my head, snogging my face.
Screw it. And
we've been together ever since.
We've literally been together ever since.
They say the best relationships are friendship on fire, which is your story literally illustrates friendship on fire. The sad thing today is that, and from a dating perspective, we meet strangers. There's very little familiarity. There's no real sense of safety. We really don't feel comfortable. What a blessing the two of you went. It took you 40 years, I guess 30 years.
35 years.
A love story, but what a beautiful share. I actually didn't know that story between the two of you. Well, it's so funny. I've heard you talk about it at parties, but I'm drinking, so I'm not even paying attention. So please forgive me because I'm not present, or at least I'm not as I am today. So Sierra, Rano, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about the work you do, how to help couples create a stronger bond with one another. You guys are doing great work. Why I shared this with everybody who's watching is because I'm a big proponent of conscious relationships. I'm a big proponent of intentional dating. I'm a big proponent of being your authentic self. And I'm a big proponent of speaking up, set those standards, speak your truth early on. And you two provide that container for those couples to help build deeper intimacy. And I'm really grateful that you came on today.
Thanks so much for having us,
yeah,
Jonathan.
Such an honor to be here.
Just love your stance. I've always loved your stance. I've always loved your heart. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Look at people are saying, oops, not mystical. Beautiful, sweet couple. Mystic Tarot card says thank you. Absolutely. Debbie says thank you, Rano and Sierra. Here's I love this. There is hope. Yes, hope. I'm going to tell you by the way, we have many mutual friends. Many of the people in Eden are dear friends of mine. I know so many great men, I know so many great women that have created really solid bonds with one another. And it's important that we don't give up hope, because as you and I talked about earlier, it is a sea of dysfunctionality out there.
Yeah,
but there's
sure.
a lot of ponies in the poop out there. If you put the effort, there's a lot of ponies in the poop out there. So you two, big hugs. Can I reach in the camera and give you two a big
I
hug?
know.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on. I want to thank Beach Lover and Megan and Holly and Maureen and Roller Girl and Deborah and Patricia, Debbie, Betty, everyone that donated tonight. Thank you so much. Wishing you all a super duper wonderful, fantastic evening. Bye now. Bye-bye.